And welcome to today's episode. You're going to love it. It's so good. It is full of so much information. It is going to expand your mind and your heart, of course. Before we get started today, I had the coolest thing happen and I wanted to share it with you. The guest that you're going to be introduced to here in just a moment reached out to me after we recorded this and requested that we honor her mentor just a bit more, which I think is so fantastic. So you're going to hear her reference her mentor several times in this episode, and that woman's full name, to give her the credit that she is owed, is Mother and Anointed High Priestess Elder Mother. So as you move forward, please know that you are able to find more information on both our guest and her mentor if you go to the show notes below. And I wanted to say one last thing as well. The topics that we're going to discuss, some of them are a bit heavy and some of them are a bit difficult to talk about or listen in on. And with that being known, our guest references as well that she would really love for there to be some sort of a hey, just so you know, we're going to talk about heavy stuff in the beginning. So, this is your warning that we will be talking about some heavier things and that it will be a discussion that might be uncomfortable. So just letting you know, I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, as did our guest. And again, thank you to her mentor, Mother and Anointed High Priestess, Elder Mother. Enjoy today's episode. You're going to love it. Hello and welcome to Brazen. I have a special gift for you today. I have been following this woman who is joining us today, and I am truly not going to even try to say her name because it is so gorgeous and it is in a tongue that I don't speak very well. So I'm going to let her say it so it can be in all its beauty. But I've been watching this woman on TikTok for a while. I've introduced a lot of you in my community to her. She is fucking brilliant. And I truly believe that anyone who is able to dive into astrology or human design or gene keys, but especially astrology and going deep into it, when you work in that and you live in that, that's a level of genius. That's a level of bad bitch that like I aspire to be. I think it's incredible when anyone can be like, yeah, this is what's going to happen on this day and this is how you're going to feel. Like it's amazing to me. And I really have introduced so many of y'all to her and several others as well, because this is your area of genius that I just think is fascinating. I think it's incredible what you know and how you can move through it intuitively and how you allow yourself to be a channel for so much amazing information and so much guidance for others that can truly change their life. So thank you so much for being here, my dear. I'm so excited to pick your brain and to let you speak in such an amazing way and be heard by so many other people. Thank you for being here. And would you like to formally introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. So I am Valkyrja Vörðr. That's the
Mm.
formal pronunciation of my name. In English, the translation is Valkyrie of the Veil. So that is the position of High Priestess that I sit in. It's the position I've been initiated into within my practice under the Norse spirits, and there's a lot of layers to that. And I've learned that I need to keep that more private. So even though I don't teach the Norse things up front on the internet, that is like an integral part of my life. And so through astrology, I'm able to really hold space for people and have this kind of more wide open lens for people to come in and see their magic and what needs to be worked on, or their weaknesses or their strengths and different things like that. So that's kind of like a very brief introduction to the work that I do. And I also do hold space for people in my magic and spirit sessions. And that is more based on like spiritual order and if they're needing to learn anything about practicing. So I do still offer that to people. But mostly these days, I've been sitting in astrology and looking at the transits and looking at people's birth charts. And it's been a really incredible transition. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm so grateful to have you here. I'm just blown away by your knowledge. And also, can I say that the way that you create your content is something that I think is incredible. It is exactly what I'm looking for when I'm going through and I'm like sitting there and doing a little scrolly, like it's your type of videos that are so informative and they're not a product like sometimes I want a production, right? But sometimes I just want to sit with another woman and be like, "Damn, that bitch is so smart." Like she is like filling me full of knowledge and it's not overwhelming because it's fun to learn it. And like the way that you present it, the simplicity, I think that's where the magic is in so much of life is realizing that it can be simple because
the delivery itself, the more simple it is, the deeper it can set in. Like when I listen to you talking about the transits and all this stuff, I'm like, now I get it because it hit, it landed. So thank you for that. That's also genius.
Yeah, and thank you for that. It took me a while at the beginning. Like when I started doing TikTok, I was making videos about my painting and my music, and like I was in a completely different era of my life. And my first video to go viral was painting, but the first video that I had go viral that was like had followers come in, I
Yeah.
was nerding out and like geeking out about numerology, the system of numerology and the Fibonacci sequence, and that became, I've been doing numerology readings for a long time. I don't offer them on like a professional level anymore,
Yeah.
but that was like the first thing. So I was like, maybe I need to go in that direction. And I've been a practitioner for many years at that point. So it was from the beginning, I've been in this kind of shift and just now have finalized where I'm sitting with the content.
Love it.
And I really enjoy the back and forth conversation too. It's something that like, that's how I speak to myself, is like that back and forth. So it's very natural. It
Yeah.
comes very naturally to me. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And anyone who's listening, by the way, make sure that you go down below and check because all of the information to reach out to her and to connect with her will be there. And I'm so excited to jump into a few of the topics that we are chatting about before we press record. One of which being that there is, by the time that this airs, it'll be April 9th. So that's when this is airing. And there is so much that is happening at that time. So we want to touch on that and also maybe a little bit of what's going on right now. Right now it's February 8th. And so we are approaching a new moon. I've been fucking feeling it. I've been feeling like I'm gonna burst out, like I'm gonna burst something out of me. I don't know what it is, but it probably this conversation, to be very honest, is part of it. So I'd love to touch on that, touch on a little bit of that April 9th. And then right around that time as well is where we're going to already be feeling a lot of what's going on with what you and I were talking about, which is America's birth chart, which is
Mhm.
fucking fascinating. So you want to kind of start with the new moon that's happening right now, move into April, and let's land in America's birth chart.
Yes, we can totally
Yeah,
do that. So we're recording. Is it okay if I speak on the date that we're recording on? Yes.
absolutely.
Okay. So we're recording February 8th. We do have a new moon tomorrow in Aquarius. And actually, let me pull up and see what our moon is in right now today. So our moon is already in Aquarius. So while we're recording this, we're like amping up to the peak of that new moon. And kind of so that, because we are going to talk about the eclipses, so I do want to preface with some moon cycle references and just kind
Yeah.
of like introduce that on a simpler level. So the way that the moon cycles work, we have the new moon. And I thought when I first started studying astrology that the new moon was the darkest moon in the sky. Like that's when we started over, but that's not true. It's when the first light comes through. It's something new. Like we're starting a new
Yeah.
cycle. So that's why they call it the new moon.
Yeah.
And then we have at the end of the cycle what's called the balsamic moon. And that moon is where the sign that the new moon was in, it returns to that new moon, or that moon sign, pardon me, the moon sign. So this new moon's in Aquarius.
Mhm.
We're going to have probably a lot of like really big innovative ideas come through. Also it being in Aquarius, we have Pluto in Aquarius right now. So we're going to have maybe a lot of what happens. People are really excited for this Pluto and Aquarius transition. What happens with Pluto is that there are so many layers of power that come through. But for you to understand that power, there's tests that you have to go through, there's trials that you have to go through. And so I've been really recommending for people to sit with their birth chart and understand where Pluto is in their chart for themselves, and then also where Aquarius is, like the house that it rules, and then any placements that you have there, because more than likely what's going to be happening is that there's going to be people coming in and testing you in that area. There's going to be situations coming in and testing you in that area. And what Pluto's asking you to do is figure out what's valuable to you. This is how Pluto generates riches. What's valuable to you? And in that value, when you're going through the death part, you hold on to it so that when you are rebirthed, that value still sits with you. And so paying attention to kind of how that Aquarius is working. And also the fact that this is the first new moon that we're having in Aquarius since Pluto has entered Aquarius. This is a big opportunity for there to be a long-term cycle set, because the new moon now, it's not just this new moon. When we have the full moon in Aquarius, like 6 months from now, there's going to be even bigger illuminations on what's happening with this new moon. And so paying attention now to kind of like how you're feeling and that area of your chart and what Pluto's asking of you too is going to be really, really important, I think, because come that full moon in Aquarius, there's going to be a lot of really big illuminations on things. It'll probably be, I don't know the exact date of that, but probably right before the next eclipse season also. And so right before another big transition. And then for people who are in their nodal returns, so people whose nodal axes are the same as what we have in the sky right now, North Node in Aries and the South Node in Libra, their nodal returns are lining up. It's an 18.5 year transition for the nodes. And so people who have that nodal return right now are really like, it's such a powerful transit because Pluto is like this is going to be like a 2023 year transit plus that 18.5 year transit. So if you're going through a nodal return right now, or you're in nodal opposition too, that can be very powerful as well. And that's where the North Node would be in Libra and the South Node would be in Aries. That right now you're able to start two new cycles, two new very long-term cycles. So it's not just about Pluto being in that 20 years. It's not just about your nodes being in the 20 years. Right now they go together. And so there's going to be a lot of moon magic overlap with the Pluto transit for people who are in those nodal axes. So if that is in your chart, pay attention to it and, you know, just see it. The thing that I recommend for people is just kind of like notice it for yourself in the details and kind of like how it's affecting you, because everyone's life is different and everyone's practice is different. But yeah, so returning to that new moon in Aquarius, it is going to be affected by that Pluto transit, but we are going to have probably a lot of things with technology. Like if Aquarius is very technologically based because it's Saturn and Uranus. Saturn is about our systems, and then Uranus is the innovation, and we innovate a lot of things through technology, and technology is very like systematic. So there's probably a lot of things about technology, doing things differently. If there's anything that you wanted to be in change in your life right now, is the time to kind of set those intentions. And then granted, that's when this is being listened to by people, if you're looking back at February 9th and kind of like what you were feeling and what you're going through. We do have the full moon this time is going to be in Virgo. So new moon in Aquarius with full moon in Virgo. So there's probably going to be some organizational things that come to light during this full moon. And then we have our March 10th. We have a new moon in Pisces, and this is going to be the final, let me see if I have that correct. I'm pretty sure new moon. Yeah. So actually, no, that's not true. This new moon, this is the final moon cycle that is pre-eclipse. So if you're wanting to do any like preparatory work, granted, this isn't coming out until April, but if you have done any preparatory work or just kind of like noticing the transitions that you were going through in that time, if you're listening to this now, really notice kind of like what that moon cycle was asking of you, because come the new moon in Pisces on the 10th, then we're walking into eclipse season. Granted, the full moon lunar eclipse is not until the 25th, but that new moon in Pisces is going to kind of like set up the stage for what's going to happen in that eclipse cycle. And I think the really interesting thing about this eclipse season is that we have a full moon lunar eclipse in Libra, that's March 25th. And then we have the April 8th new moon solar eclipse. And that is a day before this is airing. So gorgeous, beautiful. And then we have another full moon in Libra on April 23rd. So there's two full moons in Libra while this eclipse season is happening. So there's going to be, the first one is going to be very pivotal. That's the eclipse itself. There's going to be a lot of pivoting. There's going to be a lot of really big things that are integrated. If you're able to look back at what you were thinking about or what you were going through, October 14th was the new moon solar eclipse in Libra. So we were birthed into new Libra energy, the placements of Libra in your chart. There's a whole bunch of different ways that can work depending on who you are and like what your chart is. And so paying attention to those transitions for you, even if you weren't really doing it intentionally, just going back and looking at kind of realizations that you were having at that time in your life, because come the full moons, there's going to be a lot of illumination on what you were thinking about. And then the second eclipse, so the one that is happening a day before this airs, which is the new moon solar eclipse in Aries. This one I'm very excited for. We're closing the door on this Taurus story. We're finally done with the Taurus North Node. Even though the nodes have been in the axis of Libra and Aries since I believe June or July of 2023, even though we've been in that axis, the Taurus full moon in October still brought through the old axes that we were in. So we're still refining those skills. come that new moon, though, we're done. We walk into the Aries node finally. And the really interesting thing, and I mentioned this kind of before we started recording, that this is going to be a really powerful transition. And I'm very, very excited for it because this is the one time, it's the one time in our nodal exchanges that this happens. We were just in a Taurus North node, and that's Venus ruled. We had a Scorpio South node, and that's Mars and Pluto. Now we have Aries in the North node, which is Mars. Now we had Mars in the South node with Scorpio. So we've done a complete 180 there. And we have Libra in the South node, which is Venus. So we've done a complete 180 there. So that Taurus Scorpio nodal axis really asked a lot of people to go through the death and rebirth process. There's a lot of really hard things that happened to a lot of people. There was a really big transformation that a lot of us were going through, especially if you had heavy Taurus and Scorpio placements. I know for myself, I have a lot of Scorpio placements. And so there was a lot of just turbulence and change and rearrange, and who you thought you were, and like you're a completely different person now, which for the better, right? So, and now that we're walking into this new moon solar eclipse in Aries, we're finally done with that transformation, and everything that we've been thinking about, everything that we've been wanting to do, like our dream life is finally happening. And that's why I'm so excited about it, is because there is going to be such a big transition, especially for people who are, that was a bird that just hit the window. Okay, Spirit, thank you. Wow.
Oh, love that.
Yeah. So, okay, the message is coming through. Thank you, Spirit. Spirits of love. That's beautiful. Yeah, so that's going to be a really big, really big transition. When the full moon in Libra happens, the second one on April 23rd, that one is not an eclipse, but it will bring through a lot more illumination on kind of like refinement. So if you're looking at the eclipse that happened in Libra, and again, the date for that is the 25th, March 25th. So on April 23rd, that full moon in Libra is going to bring like more revelation, more clarity on that Libra placements for you in your chart. This South node in Libra is also asking us to really rein in for ourselves and take accountability in justice. So if you have wronged people, taking accountability for that, because one thing I've learned about justice since the South node on like more of a magical level, since the South node has been in Libra, is that if you deserve justice for things that have been done wrong to you, that will not more than likely be served unless you are doing the work to take accountability for the wrong that you have done. And so this is really our opportunity to kind of like create a clean slate for ourselves and earn the rewards, not just like what we deserve and not just what we're worth, because that's very Venus, right? Yeah, it's very Venus, is like self-worth. And we don't have any Venus retrogrades this year. We went through a Venus retrograde in the previous year, right before the eclipse. Like there was so much like worth by removal that was happening at the end of 2023.
Girl, I'm a self-worth coach. I was getting messages left and right, and I was like, I know.
Yeah. So that's done, thankfully. And with Aries coming through, Aries also rules the head. So there's probably going to be a lot of focus in this, the new moon solar eclipse, of like new thoughts coming through, new ideas coming through. And Aries is also, it's the charge first, think later. That's really the Mars and Aries sign. So that happening, that beginning is going to be really interesting, I think, for our Aries placements. And again, that's going to be, I don't think I've said this yet, so not again, but that's going to be our new skills. So the South node is what we're comfortable with. If you're someone who works with and believes in life regressions, then the South node is what our past lives have taught us. And the North node is what we're learning in this life for where we're going. So that North node being in Aries, there's a lot of new skills of the mind, new skills of the head, new skills in your Aries placements in your chart. And then when it comes to the South node, it's probably going to be really easy to take accountability for things and like sit in the justice of things. And then also wherever your Libra placements are, there's going to be a lot more ease with that. For people, I've been doing a lot of readings for people who are in nodal opposition. So that's where, again, the nodes are opposite in your chart to where they are in the sky, and for people who are going through nodal returns. So for people who are going through those placements right now, it's going to be a lot more impactful because that's where their nodes are specifically. So for people who are experiencing that, expect there to be a lot more grounding of ideas and different like revelations and different integrations that are happening. I know for me personally, as someone who's very sensitive on a energy level, I take the days off around the eclipses so that I do have time to sit with myself and understand what I need to. So if you feel the need to do that, I recommend that to people. But that's really what we're expecting with the eclipse season that's happening. And again, this airs on the 9th. So if you're listening to this, you will more than likely still be under the new moon solar eclipse Aries influence if you're listening to this like when it airs. So there's probably still a lot of big transitions that are happening for you and like the understandings on that eclipse too, focusing on where you want to go with your Aries placements and like what new skills do you really want to develop over the next couple of years, and understanding that for yourself is going to be helpful. And also, I think probably the final thing I want to say about this is, or like before like questions and like return the microphone back to you, is that the Mercury, so all of our planets are direct right now. I know that everyone gets kind of like, frenzied about Mercury retrogrades. They happen all the time. It's very trendy to be kind of like up about them, So we are going through a Mercury retrograde when this airs, and we will be going through a Mercury retrograde when that new moon solar eclipse is happening. The Mercury retrograde starts on April 1st. So like happy Fool's Day. Haha. It's a good joke,
Right.
Yeah, and then it's also going to be in Aries. And I believe too, we're going to have Chiron in Aries. So there's probably going to be a focusing on empowerment. If you've done the work to heal things with your Chiron placement, then there's probably going to be a lot of like realizations of like, oh, I've done the work to feel through that and I feel really good about that now.
Yeah.
Or if you're not sitting in the healing or haven't done so already, there's going to be opportunity to open that up for yourself. And with the Mercury retrograde, if you are speaking about things from January 1st is when Mercury went direct. So if you're speaking about things, where you want to go, who you want to be, especially around those Aries placements until April 1st, looking back at your journals, looking back at like text messages, however you need to go back and like remember those things, because come that new moon solar eclipse in Aries, there's going to be a lot of communication that we return to of what we've been talking about our new life and what we want to do, where we want to go and how we want to grow. So returning to that will probably be very helpful when this airs and like around that time. It's also still going to be retrograde with the final full moon in Libra, the second one that's happening, not the eclipse, but just the full moon itself. And that's April 23rd. So that full moon will probably help us refine by looking backwards and also forward at the same time, because Mercury is going to be the only planet retrograde. So we're looking back on what we have communicated about. We're probably going to be returning to that eclipse, the full moon eclipse in Libra, and like rediscovering some things, understanding some things. The planets don't happen by accident. It's very purposeful that's happening. So and then a week after that, seven days after that, Pluto retrogrades. So we have this like really big transition with the eclipses. And then immediately Pluto's like, let's rethink some things. So that I think is going to be really interesting too. But that's what we're expecting with the eclipses. And I wish everybody good luck, because eclipses can be really chaotic and a really like large time for a lot of people. So yeah.
For sure. Dude, you're so smart. I'm just blown away listening to. Okay, so I'm putting you on the fucking spot right now. I've done this before. Hopefully you don't hate it. I'd love to have you come on several times. Sure. And I'd love for you to just give us the knowledge, because I just know that there's women, there's men, there's people in my community right now that are like, this is the bitch I've been looking for. Like, this is exactly what I've been looking for. So I would love to have you come on. And I mean, I kind of like it's usually women in my community. I usually lock women into place for my community and my tribe. I'm like, hey, this is your, astrology girly. This is your Gene Keys lady. This is your sensuality coach. Like the women that I refer out to, like we talked about before we pressed record, like I know that not every area is my area of genius. And quite fucking frankly, I don't want it to be. Like, I want to always be learning, and having women like you as part of my tribe that my community knows, like, hey, Heather, like chatted with this chick, like, and they know, like, we've already talked, like, I'm going to have you do a whole reading for me. Like, I love being able to go to my community and say, hey, I checked in with this chick. She's fucking awesome. Like, she is for sure the real deal. Like, you should go check her out. I'd love for you to come back and be able to really bolster that and become part of our community even more. Would you be down?
I would love that, actually.
Cool.
Yeah. And I also too, like, I have a podcast of my own, so I don't want to like take up too much like cross marketing space.
Please do. Please do. Yeah.
I have a podcast of my own, and there's been some like personal life transitions that I've been going through. So I haven't been able to dedicate as much time, but now that those transitions are done, thankfully, I'll be able to dedicate more time. So if anyone's looking at like wanting to know, because that's a really big transition that's happening with the eclipses. It's a really like big overarching thing. But in the podcast, I do go over like smaller transitions, just like one moon cycle or like one transit of Venus, or it's more like detailed things. So if
Yeah.
anybody is looking for that kind of information, that's available. If they wanted to go and check it out, it's on the website. So yeah.
Yes, and I wrote that down. It's called Astrology and Magic with a K, right?
Yes, with a CK,
Perfect.
magic with a
CK.
CK. Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, I'm so excited. And I'm very excited to have you come back. I just am, like I said, enamored. I'm just listening and I'm like, yes, tell me more. Tell me more things. This is amazing. I'm so stoked for all that. A couple things I want to bring up. I think that it would be so beneficial for our listeners if when we're done here, I just fucking recorded, like with my phone. I'm literally going to record us like this video. And I think that I'd love to put that out now so they can get the information of what's happening with this new moon if you'd be down for it.
Yeah, that's valid. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So just a little sneak peek, be like, hey, come back April 9th. That's when the whole thing comes out, but this is really valuable. And I think it's really cool that you explain to everybody that, hey, come October time, come, when we are going back and revisiting what we're touching base on,
Mhm.
remember that, because one of the biggest things that is like a foundational tool in our toolbox for my community is I teach them like write shit down, whether it is your own healing process or whether it is just how you're feeling. If you are into doing magic and doing ritual ceremony, anything within your home, write it down. And especially when we move into, intentionally co-creating, intentionally manifesting, like it's so easy to take a 24-hour day, to take one piece of your life, the present moment, and see that one singular puzzle piece instead of zooming out and recognizing that there's an entire puzzle that you're building. And a lot of the times when my clients, I just had one of my clients come to me, she's like, Heather, I'm receiving like this information and I don't know what it is. And for her, it was numbers. And I told her, I'm like, girl, write it down for several weeks and months, because this is a singular piece to the puzzle that you're receiving. If it doesn't make any sense, stop trying to fucking make it make sense. Like, just know that you're receiving information that is bigger than what you may be thinking and feeling. And, when we do that, when we write things down, we can become so much more in control of our lives in so many different ways, from mental, emotional, physical, spiritual health. And I personally, we had talked about practices and spiritual order and spiritual hygiene. Like, that's a huge piece for me, is writing things down. So that way I'm not remembering wrong, or I'm not fluffing my own past. You know what I mean? Like, or being like, well, maybe that is what it is. No, I want the facts. What was I feeling that day? So that way I can look right at what's happening now and go through it full for. I am an Aries, so it's definitely do now, think later. Like, I go into it and I'm like, okay, let's figure out what's happening. Because otherwise it's very easy to forgive my bluntness, to fall into really toxic, really bullshitty spirituality. And it becomes a like pray it away or sage it away situation where you're like, oh, let me just pretend like it's not a big deal and it's all positive. No, my dude, life has the dark and the light, and you're going to have to look at it. And I find that that's the easiest way to have the courage to walk through heavy situations, especially if you're paying attention to the astrological events. That's what my brain said. Paying attention to the astrological events that are happening and how they're connecting. You cannot serve your own bullshit up and eat it. You have to look in the mirror then. If you're reading on a piece of paper, oh damn, I got in a fight with blah, 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 and I said some shit I didn't mean. When that comes back around, you're going to be like, this is my opportunity to be done with that pattern, to be done with that habit, to be done with that story. And I just find that writing things down overall helps. I mean, that's what we've been doing as women for so long, y'all. Like, get back in the habit. But it really is helpful, especially with these events, because it makes it easy to look in the mirror and do so with compassion and do so with a lot of accountability as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, of course. You're welcome. And thank you for like retouching on it and like,
Yeah,
like giving value to it. Thank you for that.
for
Yeah.
sure, dude.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we are talking about the April 9th and the total solar eclipse, or April 9th airing, total solar eclipse on April 8th, we had talked about before that my birthday is on April 7th. So I'm totally going to ask, what can I expect? And then I'd love to talk about America's birth chart.
It's like a big people who have, and it's funny that you asked that because in the previous several months, every time that
Yeah.
I've posted a transit or like something that's happening, there's been
Yeah.
people in the comments who have been like, "That's my birthday," or like, "It's so, it's
Shit,
really,
yeah.
basically every video these days, I get to wish people happy birthday, and I think that
Love
that's a really,
that.
really, really fun thing.
Yeah.
Um, for you having your birthday the day before the eclipse, and actually let me pull up and see too, if you'll allow me a moment, to
Yeah.
see what the like moon is in and like when the what day the moon enters into that Aries space.
Yeah.
Because then I'll be able to see kind of the difference between like what if you're going to be kind of like pre it or if you're already going to be in the area of it, you know.
Gotcha.
um because
Yeah.
if it's before, then you can expect some different things to ground, but if you're already in that energy, then there's probably going to be a lot of really big things that happen for you. Like, on a general note, it's going to be a really like a rebirth of your entire self, because that solar return, the birthday, is
Yeah.
really about like a new self, a new version of you. You have a whole brand new year, and then that being paired with an eclipse, and it's the new moon, like a new moon eclipse is a new cycle, and then it's being paired with like that's a wild thing to happen. The fact that that your birthday is that day, because that being together means that you're not only going through a solar return, you're not only birthing a new self, you're not only birthing a new year, you're birthing a new like 18-year cycle.
Yeah.
And that's really wild to me. That's really wild. So let's see what the moon is in that day. It's going to already be in Aries. So there you go. So you're going to be under the influence of it. More than likely, when does the moon enter? Let's see. It might be a day before that. Because that's the 7th. You said April 7th is your birthday.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So it enters on, it looks like the end of day, April 6th, the moon will enter Aries. And so you'll have kind of a day before too, to really kind of like set yourself up for that. And what happens too in eclipse season is one of the things I've realized, at least in my personal magic, and it might be different for other people, is that there's not just one big thing that grounds. There's usually many big things that ground. And like when you're going, for me, when I go through the moon cycles, sometimes it's not the peak of the moon that uh, really brings through that transformative grounding or information. Sometimes it's before, sometimes it's after, but it's usually always in the same sign that the moon is taking place in.
Mm.
So I would really say, like, take your time to understand what it is that you want for the next 18 years. Like, that's a really long time. That's a
Yeah,
really, really
man.
long time. Yeah. And then two, that we were talking about before we started, or maybe it was during, I'm not exactly sure in this moment, but the pairing of, oh no, I think it was in the middle of it, the pairing of people who have their nodal returns right now
Mm.
happening with the Pluto transit. So that even if you don't have your nodes in the Aries and Libra for you, it's still going to affect you on that 18-year cycle, because you are having this rebirth moment. Plus the solar eclipses is like the ring of fire. So it's this birthing happening. There's birth happening for ourselves. There's birth happening for these new placements. There's birth happening in society. It's birth energy is what happens on
Yeah.
the new solar eclipses. So, and it's your birthday. So it's not just a new birth of you, it's a new birth of an 18-and-a-half-year cycle for you. And paired with that Pluto transit could be very, very, very powerful. So however you want to sit in that, I would recommend you do that. Like, use your discernment and do what you need to do for that, because that's a lot of really powerful, potent energy that you're going to be wielding. So
Fuck yeah.
yeah.
Um, Full body goosebumps, so many reasons. Don't know where to start. Number one, you said a phrase that just caught me off guard, because as you were talking, I was like, yeah, man, I very intentionally, very much with the help of ceremony and my journal and my personal practices. Sorry, my old man dog is like in here now. He's sad because he can hear mom, but he couldn't see her. So now he's behind me. But at the end of last year, October, I made the decision that I was going to not just shut a chapter, but shut a book on a lot of big things. And I was feeling so called to do some really big releases, final cord cuttings, final, searing of the edges, even of a lot of experiences and stories and people that have had the biggest impact of the last 18 years and more of my life. And since then, I've had probably the most incredible January that I've had in a long time. Sometimes Januaries can just fucking suck. And this January hasn't. It's been incredible. And
Good.
as yeah, and as
Yeah.
you were saying that, I'm like, I feel that because it's just been like very much in line with the energies. I am stepping into an identity, and I've been talking about it in my business since like last summer. I'm like, y'all are going to start seeing more of me. Like, I just am so multifaceted, so multi-interested in things. Like, and it's difficult to find that voice online because it's like, how do I show that in 60-second reels while I talk to a phone by myself in my fucking house? Like, it's weird. It's a weird thing we have had to evolve into. And so this identity is that I've really stepped into. I'm so proud of her because it's really all of my favorite pieces of who I've been throughout the last, 30 plus years of my life, and the trials and tribulations, and being able, oh, it's okay, Georgie, you're fine, bubs. But just being able to integrate all of those into my life, it's been so cool. So today, before we met up, I was making a few videos, and one of them, I shit you not, this goes back to what you were just saying and the phrase you said. I was wearing my Johnny Cash tank top that I love, that I got on one of my road trips. So it says Cash. And I was wearing a choker like I am right now. And so while I was making the video, I just had this fun little thought. I was like, I should just tell them, like, hey, if you're the type of fucker that's going to take life advice from a chick that's wearing a Johnny Cash shirt and a choker, then I probably want to work with you. And as soon as you said something about Ring of Fire just then, I was like, how the hell? Like, all of that was already happening in my mind and in my heart. And then you said that, and I was thinking about that video because I giggled to myself when I made it. I was like, this is going to make some of my favorite soul sister clients be like, this is my bitch. And it's going to make some people be like, that's not the lady I want to work with. And it's been part of the identity of my business, of recognizing at an even deeper level as my business and myself continue to scale, that the magnetism, as I know, works both ways. And in the same way that I'm going to magnetize my tribe to me, I'm also going to repel some people that really don't fucking dig my vibe. And that's been a part of the identity for myself, because as you do this work, a big piece for me is like friends, from the small town I'm from, family members even being like, oh, are you like an Instagram influencer? Are you like, what do you do? Like, what do you do? Do you just scam people? Well, at one point in my life, I thought coaches were scammers too. So like, that's fucking coming full circle. And that's been a big piece, is as I scale and become bigger, it's the audacity factor. It's the, who the fuck does she think she is? She grew up between these two cornfields just like I did. Who the fuck is this bitch? And I've been feeling the jumping of the hurdles as I've been really sitting with that from all angles about how I feel about it internally. What does that look like? Subconscious, unconscious? What does that look like with conversations and boundaries? Like, really taking it full circle with the identity. So thank you. As you were talking, I was like, huh, the whole time. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's funny too, like talking about the on a personal level, I experienced similar things because I grew up, literally my backyard was a cornfield. So
Yeah.
I understand that. I understand like people just looking at you and being like, what is it that you do exactly?
Right.
Like, and I
Right.
always find it like the most strange thing to explain to people. But then when I do explain it, there's usually either people are like, whoa, that's really cool. Like, I can't believe
Yeah.
like I've never met anyone who does that before. Or it's people are like, the one question I get, like I used to get, I haven't gotten it very recently, but the one question I used to get pretty often was like, how do you make money doing that? Or like, how
Right.
do you make a living? Like, what does that look like? And I'm
Yeah.
like, my finances are not any of your business, but thank you
Right.
for being interested in it. So I understand that part of it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for diving into that. I'm so
Mhm.
excited to have you back on. So excited to have you do a reading. I'm definitely going to schedule that as soon as we get off of here, just so we're both on the same page.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So tell me about America's birth chart and about how you feel about moving into this energy. And just to give it a bit of a preface, I'm the preface queen. Um, when listeners, when I tell you that this is something that I am fascinated with, since about literally like just a few months before everything went down in March 2020, I was feeling shit and I didn't know what I was feeling. I didn't know, like, I was not as in depth into astrology, into the work I am now. Obviously, I learned a lot. but I knew there was something going on. And I was like, gosh, I just feel like I can feel a shift. I can feel something. And when everything started to happen, I was having a lot of conversations with people and they're like, I've been feeling like something was going to change. I could feel this coming. And obviously, a lot of horrific things happened upside down and in between with that, with everything that went down and continues to go down. But I really believe that some of the coolest shit that came from that is so many people's eyes opened in a way that they had never been opened before. And I found myself really holding so much space for the deconstruction because so many people are like, the world is falling apart and everything's fine. I'm like, bro, we are deconstructing a system that hasn't fucking worked for so long. Like, we are in a deconstruction phase. And guess what? After that comes a rebuild. And let's just breathe air into that. Let's breathe life into that instead of being so hung up on something that was put into place 200 years ago and written with a fucking feather. Let's, reevaluate where we are and ask ourselves, how can we become better, be better, do better, give more, be more? And that's been my space that I've sat in with this for so long. And the more I learned about astrology, the more I talk to women like yourself and people like yourself doing this work, it's like, yeah, that's the energy. That's what's been flowing through us. So I'm so excited to dive into this. I'm so excited to hear your take on it. And just go for it, babe. Tell me all the things.
Thank you. So I also love preface and preparation. So I'm also going to preface before I go into this. This chart is something that I have not actually had a really deep look at yet. It's something that I have been turning. So this is going to be kind of like a first look at things for
Nice.
myself. There's aspects of it that I've looked at prior to right now. But I've realized in my personal work that there is the responsibility that I sit in as a practitioner, as someone who has inherited whiteness, to be able to bring these different lenses. Because astrology is not just about what the planets are doing and the transits, it's also about how that information is presented. And that goes really for any system that we're sitting in spiritually. It's about how the information is presented and like our integrity in that. And then also not just our intention, but the impact that we're sitting in. And so I do want to preface with, I have not sat with this on a very deep level before we get into it.
For sure.
And then I also too want to return for a moment to a little bit of American history. We talked about this before we hit record, before you hit record. So I'm looking at the birth chart, July 4th, 1776. Now, I think that it's important to dive into, even if we talk about it on a surface level, ancestral accountability and practices, and also the institution of enslavement and how that really influenced. And also, before I really dive into that, like, as I am someone who has inherited whiteness, and I want to make that very clear to people who are sitting and listening and are not able to see my face. So there are things that I have not lived as an experience, and my ancestors are, they're different than even, how do I say this? People who would live in the places where like the old gods would come from. Like, our American ancestry makes our relationship to the spirits very different, and we are not originally from this land, so our relationship with the land is very different. So I just want to preface with that. And also, okay, so side tangent done, going back into like more of the American history part of it, is that the institution of enslavement was founded late August 1619. And I think that that story and the stories thereof are so important because as I've been reading the 1619 Project, I've been learning about and also doing my ancestral work and sitting with ancestral accountability and responsibility and like calling death to a lot of the curses that I was born into, which is a really, really deep and powerful work. So if you're someone who's doing that, I revere you and I give my gratitude, reverence, and love to you because it is a lot. And with that, I've learned that one of the actual driving forces for us to claim our independence, to fight for it, was because that Britain was offering freedom to enslaved peoples, and America saw that as this very basically like an attack on their liberty. So had that not happened, had there not been this other system that was offering freedom to enslaved people, we might not actually have founded when we did, which I think is a very integral part of the story. Yeah, I think it's a very integral part of the story. And also too, like the way that capitalism is woven into that institution as well. So I just want to, before we get into the depths of it, I don't know how much, because I did pull up the chart from late August 1619 as well. I don't know how much I'm going to get into that. I may go back and forth between them. I don't really know where this is going to go as another part of the preface. I don't know where this is going to lead into. But just again, like I just want to kind of like bring a lens, like that's kind of where I'm coming from before we get into it, so the listeners understand what the work really sits in and where I sit in that integrity too. Because the work for me is not just like, how do I say? It's not just something that I apply to my practice. It is something that goes far deeper than the lives that we live. It's the lives before us and the stories that have come before us too. And if we're going to go this far back in time, and actually, I do want to take a moment and give reverence, gratitude, and love. I give reverence, gratitude, and love to the mother spirits of love and the father spirits of love and the spirits of love and the highest spirit and the great mother spirit and the great father spirit, and to the indigenous spirits of the land where both you and I sit and stand, and where the listeners are while they're listening to this, because that, thank you, spirit. Yes, that's the type of integrity I mean, is like continuing to revere the spirits and also being aware of those patterns that we do come from ancestrally. So I think too, again, this is kind of a longer preface than I thought it was going to be, but before we do get into it, like I think that work of ancestral deconstruction, because you even brought it up, like the deconstruction of like the systems that are happening, like there's a lot of people who are starting to open up deconstruction within themselves. It's become kind of like a trendy thing to sit in that deconstruction work. So for anyone who is thinking about that or wondering what that looks like, it's different for everyone. As someone who has been sitting in ancestral accountability and deconstruction work since, I think it was, when did I start? I think it was 2019 that I started. It was October 2019, because I'm born on Halloween. And so every Halloween I do like a new ritual. What am I going to do this year? So that's when I started working with my ancestors.
I love that.
With 2019, and then we had everything that happened in 2020 with the just how the world kind of went a little wild there for a moment, and it hasn't really transitioned back into what we would have called normal before that. There's been some more normalcy, but so also again, just a little bit of more reference for my practice and where I come from in that too. So for anybody who's thinking about doing that, there are sessions I offer for people that are the magic and spirit sessions on my website. I did used to teach more just magic spaces, and I don't really sit in that as deeply anymore. But if there's anyone who's wondering about that on a personal level, you're not sure where to begin, I'm not the only answer. If you feel like if you feel like, just like you say, you're not the only genius, like it's important to have community. I am someone who has experience, but also at the same time, if you have the intuition, if you have something within yourself that you feel like it's important to start doing to begin that deconstruction work or to continue that deconstruction work, and also having this be recorded in Black History Month as well, like, yes, like having that type of accountability when it comes to spiritual spaces is something that is really important. And also too, one of my main mentor, Mother N, she's my spiritual mother. I was just speaking to her recently. There is a link to her website on the about page on my website too. So if anybody's interested in looking into her work, there's like a double layer of that.
Love that.
I was speaking to her recently because she's Afro-Indigenous, and one of the things that she brought up was that for Black people, and this is her words, that ancestral practice, it's one and the same to their spirituality. But when you're looking at a lot of people who have inherited whiteness and their practice, it's very separate. It's this very different thing. And there's a lot of people who just like banish the ancestors and don't work with them and don't sit with them. And one of the things that I've learned, and she said that's where the problem is. That was kind of the end of her quote. One of the things I realized sitting in that ancestral accountability is that, and like sitting and working with the ancestors, is that Yes, you do have to be specific when calling on those energies of the ancestors, and especially if you're someone who sits in ritual and calls on the spirits in practice, like that's a very serious thing. Because I know for myself, I do not want certain ancestors showing up in the work to help me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you do start this work, if you're someone who's kind of at the beginning of it, I feel like it's important to give a preface, because I know that there's a lot of people that I've worked with who have not ever even like thought about it, or they thought about it and have no idea where to begin. At some point, there does become this layer, for me at least, and I've seen it with other people that I've worked with, there becomes this layer where you do start to get messages from those ancestors who were of malevolence, and you do start to learn from them. And it's really important. It's really, really important in my experience to revere them. Don't sit and fear them, revere them, and understand what they have to say. And also allow yourself to sit in your power and walk your way without, and thank you, the mother spirits of love. Thank you for being here with me. Sit in your power of what it is that you want and calling your path. And because we are also ancestors. We sit in our bodies. We are ancestral spirits. And so we have the ability to change those narratives and to create new spaces in this world where there is safety in whiteness, which is such a profound change that I hope that I get to see in this lifetime, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to within like communal spaces. So that's the big preface. That's that's the really big preface before we get into this, just for like integrity of work and integrity of practice, and also so that listeners kind of understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
When I do read this, because I think that it's important to not only, like, if you're going to sit and learn from someone, especially on a spiritual level, it's important to know about kind of their background and where they come from and what they do. So
I
that's
appreciate that.
yeah.
I
So
love
uh,
that. Before we start, I need to make,
mhm.
can you hear my dog whining just
I
nonstop?
know I
You
cannot, but
can't? Okay.
no.
Well, he's not gonna, he's literally found a way to open this door and I don't know how right now. So he's my old boy. He's 14. Yeah, 14 on April 10th, actually. So he might come in here, y'all. You might hear him whine, and my apologies, but he just wants to be close to mama. He can't really see me or hear me anymore. So as long as I just reach down and touch him every now and then, he's okay. So,
Oh, yeah. Let him be loved. That's
oh
fabulous.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, girl,
Um,
tell us all about
yeah.
it.
So I guess like when I start reading people's charts, I always ask if there's anything that they want to know or like want to sit in. So is there anything that
Yeah.
you're interested in? Is there anything that you want to know about from this?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess what does this look like during the rebuild? Like, I just feel like we have been in it for a while, like I said, and in my heart, in my soul, like it just feels like we are creating something better than has ever existed. And I know, trust me, I'm not ignorant. Anybody that's listening, like, I'm not ignorant to what's happening in the world. I don't know all the things, but I do know that there's a lot happening. But I really believe that we are rebuilding. We are doing something better. And I have a lot of hope and a lot of faith in the fact that, we're going to be living in an even better, bigger, amazing world very, very soon. And it will be big shifts that create massive, incredible change. So I'd love to really focus on that if we can.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. So I guess I'll start with Pluto, because we did
Yeah.
just go through our Pluto return. And before we pressed record, I was talking about how like big of a transit that is. And I can't remember the exact dates. I think it's like 200 and let me look it up actually. And that way we have accurate information. Um, but it's long. It's over 200 years.
Yeah.
So I'll look it up in a moment, because I do want to kind of more deep dive into this. Ours is in Capricorn. So again, July 4th, 1776. That's the chart that I'm looking at. It's Capricorn, the Pluto's retrograde, and it's at 27 degrees. So 27 degrees is more of a mature degree. It's an older degree. It's more serious. There's more wisdom to it. It requires that there's more like accountability, and it takes longer. Capricorn also, generally speaking, Oh, gotta love Capricorn. It's ruled by Saturn. It has to do with the systems that are pretty inescapable. That includes systems like gravity. We're not able to escape it. Even if we build rockets and we fly into space, we still call it zero gravity. We're still related to the system. So the other way that I explain Capricorn to people too is it's the systems that have taken generations to build will more than likely take generations to change. So
Yeah.
when we are going through change as a country, it is generational. It is something that takes many generations to create. Not that that's a bad thing, because the other thing about Capricorn is that it's very detailed, and that's why it takes a long time. So we're able to get into all of the like corners and the nooks and the crannies and really get a good look at what is going on and why it's there, and where we can go from there and what kind of changes can be. The fact that it's retrograde, I always say that retrograde, like having Pluto retrograde, is actually good luck in a chart, because what happens with Pluto when you're going through the death period, there's the death, and then there's this liminal space in between, and then at the end of that liminal space, that's when the birth happens. But when you have a Pluto retrograde, what happens is that there's the birth, and then you have the liminal space where both the new and the old exist at the same time. So it's not just like this empty space. There's like two lives happening at once. And then we have the death of what has been. It goes so that you can live the new thing. So the fact that we have that as a country, like we have to be able to build the new systems and birth the new systems before we are able to really deconstruct the old ones. And I think that that's really important to keep in mind, because having Pluto in Aquarius now, one of the things about Aquarius, and we might venture into a little bit more like out there territory with the wording of this, but one of the things that Uranus rules over is rebellion and revolution. It's like doing things differently, breaking the rules, being a rule breaker, being like kind of a misfit is what that is about. So the fact that we have Pluto moving through Aquarius just after that Pluto return, like there's a lot of rules that are going to be broken. However that looks, I'm not sure. I'm not one to speculate. And I'm also not one to give advice on those things, because I feel like that's a personal decision. You know, I'm not going to get myself involved, but
you do you, boo-boo.
Yeah. I think that the interesting thing about that transition is that we have our moon in Aquarius. Like no matter the time of day that you look at July 4th, we have our moon in Aquarius, and we also have our south node in Aquarius. So we have this like really comfortable skill of doing things differently. It makes sense that we're really good at, as a country, doing things differently and breaking the rules and making our own rules, and like basically not having to abide by anybody else's systems, because our system is different. Whether that's good or bad is up to your opinion. And the moon being here, having Pluto move through that is I really think that there's going to be a lot of emotional power that is tested for Americans, because we have to remember that if we talk about these on like a systemic level, these placements on a systemic level, they also affect Americans on an individual level, whether you are someone who was born here, or you were born here and you moved away, or you're someone who immigrated here, like, or you're just visiting, however it works for you. If you are in relationship to America somehow, then there are going to be these things that are affecting you. Because I know for me personally, I work with a lot of international clients. So if there's anything that is happening for you that is America based, like these things will be in effect for what you're dealing with and what you're like going through as well, when you're in the American energy. The fact that we had Pluto return, so what happens with the Pluto return is that we have this big cycle of power and death and transformation and rebirth that comes to an end. And I think that's why we're feeling this kind of like shaky, rocky. There's a lot of things that are happening, a lot of things that are changing. There's ground that's rearranging. And now that Pluto has passed that return, and is not probably going to return, we have another big 200-year plus long transit of this. So now we get to start over. This is like a new rebirth of like, what do we want this cycle around? And since it's bigger than us, this generation, the generations that are happening right now, we kind of set the precedent. We set the groundwork for where we want to see the next generations to go, because reminding again, our Pluto being in Capricorn, it takes generations to make the change. So the work that that we do now will affect the generations coming through. And I mean, that happens cyclically in our cycles, no matter, you know, where you're at or who you're involved with. That's just how that works. That's part of Capricorn, is we can't escape that. But having the fact that our death and transformation happens that way, if there are transformations that you would like to see, or like if the listener would like to see, setting the groundwork now and being a part of that rebirth process is going to be really important for even when we're gone. So that's something to keep in mind. And again,
can I throw something in on that? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
There is something that I say quite frequently in my community, and I just really think it fits really well there. So much of the time, and I'm sure somebody has said this before me, I'm sure I've seen it somewhere. So somebody find the quote and give them the props on this. But so much of the fucking time, we are so focused on how we can be an obedient descendant, how we can be an obedient freaking son, daughter, granddaughter, all of these things, instead of how we can be an honorable ancestor. Like your obedience to rules that you never understood or bullshit that you never agreed to, although it might keep the peace. And I do know that this is somebody that said this, so quote her, not me. Whose fucking peace are you keeping? Like, start becoming the honorable ancestor. Think beyond this lifetime. I personally am not giving birth to children, but I have a lot of children that call me mama or call me auntie, and some of them ain't blood. And I'm leaving this world, leaving what I can as a legacy, so that way their lives and their children's lives and so on, when those children, those adults are sitting in ceremony, I'll be their ancestor. They'll be like, bitch, we did some work back in my day. Like, I see you and I'm proud of you. Like, pay attention to the fact that if you are that lone wolf, if you are that rebellious spirit, and if you're listening to this podcast that's called Brazen, I'm sure you fucking are, like, you are not here to be obedient descendant of people that maybe you don't fit the puzzle pieces in with, right? Like, become the one who sets the stage, creates a legacy. And like you've been saying, my dear, do it in love. Do it in love. Do, like, if you are ever like, I don't know what to do it in love. That's all. That's a thing right there. And I just think that if more people did that, myself included, like I'm totally in this. Like, if we all did that more often and we had that as an intention more often, we would see big shifts. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, of course. And I think too, to kind of reflect on that as well, one of the things that I've been realizing, and this goes back to kind of that really long preface that I had before we got into this astrology chart, is the like ancestral accountability. One of the things that I've been realizing through the ancestral work that I've been sitting in recently, as I have started to more deconstruct enslavement and how that is connected to my ancestral lineage, one of the things that I've been realizing is, because in reading the 1619 Project, like, I'm just realizing my ancestors' relation to the institution of enslavement. And there was a lot of enslavers who would have children with the enslaved, and those children would also remain enslaved. So their own blood, the enslaver's blood, would remain enslaved. And there is a lot of people, whether there is inherited whiteness or not. I know for myself, as someone who has inherited whiteness, that is an ancestral binding and a bondage that I was under until very recently, setting accountability and very large boundaries with my ancestral spirits. And you were talking about being obedient to the ones who come before us. And I think that that's where, on an ancestral level, that pattern really stems from for Americans, and for other ancestral lineages that are connected to institutions of enslavement, because that and that pattern in it, specifically with the children, because that's something, like, I don't speak on that lightly. And I feel like maybe before, if there's a way to go back and put maybe like a trigger warning, I always am trying, like, I want to, not trying to, I do want to be very like aware of the fact that these kinds of conversations can be very triggering for people. So I don't know if there's a way to like edit that in before this, because that sometimes people don't have space to sit with that. Or like, sometimes it needs to be something that is listened to like later on, or not at all, depending on how people, like are what they need. But yeah, I think from my perspective, like talking about ancestral practices and also what you're speaking on, I think that's where that really comes from, or at least my perspective of it, what I've had to do in my practice recently as well with my ancestors. So just some more, some more depth to it. Just add that in. Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna have to read that book. I have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to that book. So I'm very interested.
It's a beautiful project, and allow me, it's sitting right here. I'm gonna just reach forward and grab it so that I can have the author's name. It's a collection of writings. It's created by Nicole Hannah Jones. It's a winner of the Pulitzer Prize and the New York Times Magazine. And here, I'll show it on the camera too.
Yes, please.
If it's not going to be super blurry, I have the blurry background on. Yeah. So it's really, really good. I'm not super far into it yet because I started reading it probably a year ago. And the minute I opened up the book and started reading, my body, like when I work with my ancestors, it's very body connected. And so there's a lot of messages I get through feelings and different understandings through the physicality of things. And I was sitting at a cafe. I had just gone to a bookstore and I was like, I know I need to read this. So I picked up the book and I went to a cafe and I started reading it at the cafe. And I got probably like a page into the introduction. And I was like, I cannot read this at the cafe. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to cry because there's things I need to process. So now that I have, there's a lot of other things I've had to deconstruct since then. So that's kind of like the pause before I did get into the book, because it is something like, in my experience, sitting with that kind of ancestral deconstruction, there's so many layers to it. There's so many different layers to it. And we were also talking about God relationships and like the spiritual work beforehand too. And I know for me, it's without the spirits that I give offering to within the Norse structure, and without the spirits, there's other spirits that come to me as well. Not as frequently, but there are spirits that I sit with that are not Norse. But without the Norse tools that I've been taught and like giving offerings for those tools, because nothing comes for free, and they make sure that I understand that if I'm going to learn from them, I need to pay them. So in love, I give them what they need, so that I can receive what I need to. So without their tools, I would not have been able to deconstruct what I have thus far. And I think too, that's a part of a longer, and so I don't want to get too deep into it, but also a larger conversation of people who are in America and have some kind of ancestral lineage that's connected to America. If there are old gods that you have relationships with, those old gods are older than probably the institution of enslavement. And so there are tools, at least the American institution of enslavement, because there's other institutions that have existed. So there's tools that those spirits are able to give to you if you have them in your practice and revere them, that are able to help you get through those things. It's not something that you have to do by yourself. And I know for me too, those spirits definitely held me accountable, and I definitely got smacked a couple times to make sure that I was doing what I needed to do, kind of thing. They make sure that I'm grounded, which I really need that as a teaching tool to keep myself in the humble space, and to keep myself grounded, because that's just what it is. But yeah, so I guess that was another side tangent, but I think that's
I love that. I think so too. And I really am glad that you bring that up, because I think a really big piece to the puzzle for many of us as we rebuild is understanding and respecting and honoring the belief systems of others, and just simply like being open about this stuff and talking about it. You and I chatted a little bit before we pressed record as well. Like, I've deconstructed a lot, and especially the last like 10 years. It's been a lot of deconstructing and really identifying what I believe in, what I believe in outside of the noise, outside of the bullshit, outside of what I've been told, what my heart believes, what my soul believes. And I think that cultivating a culture, society that allows everyone to be safe in their beliefs. And, it always goes back for me to the, do no harm, take no shit. Like, that's always the thing for me. Like, as long as you're not hurting anyone or yourself, and as long as you have a grounding and a boundary toolbox within, allow yourself to explore what it is. Sorry, the dog's still whining. George, could we not? Like, I'm still on a podcast, my dude. Come here. as long as we have those, I just feel like it's so easy, so much easier to hold space for others and what they believe and how they're believing. And to do that, it's so much easier to do that than to judge, to hate, to find some way where it's wrong. I'm gonna have to pick him up. Sorry. He's just gonna be in the podcast with us.
Yeah,
Here,
no.
Bubba. Come
Welcome
here,
him
Bubba.
in.
Come here, Georgie. He's my old boy, so he's just gonna sit with us for a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Do you feel better?
Oh,
He's shaking. He's like, Mom, I could hear you, but I couldn't see you. Okay,
oh,
Bubba.
baby. Oh,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
that's
And I think
amazing.
yeah, and I think that what you said too about like the important note of like being open to everyone's beliefs as long as they're not doing harm, like I think that's an important thing too, because I think that a lot
Yeah.
of people, at least people who are, at least in my perspective, people that I see at the beginning of a spiritual journey sometimes are just open to everything. And that's maybe not a bad place to be because we all have to start somewhere. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I know for me, it's been a learning process of like, actually, that's not healthy. Actually, maybe we do need some boundaries. Actually, maybe we do need to step away from that kind of practice.
Yeah,
So,
man.
yeah, so just, the evolution for people who practice spirituality, I know for me has been something that's so interesting. Like when you do become a practitioner, your life changes a lot. So,
Yeah.
yeah, because you
It's
change a lot. That's what it is.
bro, one of my mentors calls it self-improvement, self-development on crack. Once you decide that you want to become a teacher and you want to step into, that passion, that purpose, that life, that journey, you definitely have to hold a mirror to yourself, because if you don't, universe, God, source, creator will, and sometimes that mirror sucks.
Yeah, it does.
And
Yeah, it
you
does.
have to grow some serious fucking discernment, and you have to open that throat chakra, baby, because you're gonna have to speak some boundaries, and you're gonna have to do it to yourself in the mirror. Like there's some practices that, especially like I remember like a few that even were just like body pack practices, like, getting more in touch with my body, listening more to my intuition, listening more to what my body needed. I collected so much information from so many incredible teachers, and some of that shit that I put into practice, I will never go back to, but I'm quite grateful that I did it to begin with, because it did help me connect with my body, but it also kind of gave or not gave, it created an opportunity that I took to give my power away. Like giving my power away, especially when it comes to my physical body. And I would love to have you back on to talk about this. I just think that so many women, especially, we are used to having our power taken away when it comes to our body. And that's a hard fucking boundary for me. Like, that's a hard no. So when I start to feel that my power is, on the docket in any way, shape, or form, when it comes to my body, when it comes to my sovereignty there, like, it's just a hard fucking no for me. So,
Mhm.
like you said, definitely like be open to learning about yourself and learning about what you believe and what you feel and what practices you want to put into place. I completely agree. Honey, you're literally on my lap. You couldn't be closer to me if you wanted to. Um, but I believe that the only way that we can really create a discernment that is foundational for us, that we can believe in, is if we fucking hit up against our edges sometimes and try some shit that we've never tried before.
Yeah, that's true. I would love to come back on and talk specifically about that with you because I think,
Yeah.
like, even earlier in the podcast, I had this moment of realization within myself while you were talking. I was like, whoa, women empowerment. Like, there's been so many toxic women's spaces I've been in, and like toxic womb spaces, like to discern between the two,
Yeah.
that I've been in previous years. And it's just recently in my personal and in my public life where I have been welcomed into very, very healthy women's spaces, womb spaces, and like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's very different. And I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to come through and have that space of empowerment and like what you're doing for people to be able to offer that type of space, to be able to hold space for people. Even though you're on a podcast, like you're a host, like you're still holding space for other creators to be able to experience that. And then also
Yeah.
holding space for people to be able to experience that through listening to the podcast as well.
Yeah.
And I would love to come back on and talk about that sort of topic specifically because it's so deep. There's so many things that we could get into, and I feel like that's not
Yeah.
the like vein of nature that we're sitting in today. But yes, that's something I would love to talk about. So, wow,
Yes,
yeah.
please. I'm very, very excited to have you back on, my dear. And I just realized, I know, honey, you probably have to go potty. I just realized that I've already kept you for an hour and a half. So thank you. I didn't even
Yeah,
notice
I
that.
didn't realize. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for your time, for your wisdom, for all of this. As I sit and listen to you talk, I just know that it's coming from such a deep place of authenticity and integrity. And um, to be very honest, that's something that I look for in the people that I work with. It's something that I look for when I create my tribe and my community, because just like yourself, there were several years of having very toxic, relationships with women, is even from the start of my life. So it's been an ongoing process of learning how to really cultivate healthy and expansive and loving relationships with women. And the root of that for me is always going to be that vulnerability, that love, that compassion, and that integrity. So thank you. I love the way that you bring it forward. And I'm so fucking stoked to have you back. Like, I hope that this is like a quarterly thing that we do, if not more. And I'm not going to, I already like put you on the spot like 5 times. So I'm not going to do this on the spot, but I do want to let you know that I feel in my heart there's a lot of opportunities that I hold throughout the year to bring women into my community in bigger ways, and I would love to offer that to you when we're done doing this, because I feel like what you teach, how you teach, the energy that you bring into rooms, I really feel like a lot of the women in my community that I work with could use that. So I'm excited
Thank
to talk to
you.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, send me the information, however you need to connect with me for that. I will be open to
Yeah.
receive. So thank you. Thank you
Yes.
for that. Wow. And thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to come on and speak to like your people and your group and your community.
Yeah.
And like, I'm very grateful to be in a space where I am received by others who are, because there are some really serious things that we talked about in today's podcast,
Yeah.
so to be received by others in a space of love and to be revered in that, like, thank you for the opportunity to be seen in that and to be received by others in that. I'm very grateful for that. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. This has been one of the most interesting podcasts, like the most interesting conversation, to be very honest. Like, these are the type of conversations I try to have with people at like coffee shops, and they're like, bitch, it's 10 a.m. Like, I need you to calm down. So I'm very grateful to be able to have it with you. So
Yeah.
excited for us to continue working together. And you guys, before we end, I'm going to ask you, my dear, is there anything else
Mhm.
you want to leave them with? They have their ears perked up. What do you want to tell them as they
Yes.
are listening now on April 9th or in that time? What do you want to tell them?
That's true. I guess really like we're just going through a lot of really big new beginnings. There's a lot of opportunity to start over right now. There's a lot of opportunity to do new things and to become a new person. And a lot of us have been going through the transition of going through in the background, like becoming that new version of ourselves. There's a lot of different, it seems like you focus a lot on empowerment. There's a lot of empowerment that Spirit's been having me sit in with the people who come to learn from me recently as well. So like, if there is something that your heart feels called to do, go and do it. If you have really been through the work and you have been through the dirt and you have done the work to
Yeah.
get rid of the things that do not serve you, and maybe that's the work that you're working on right now. I know collectively there's a lot of people transitioning into growing new life and less focused on that. But even if that is your work right now, like, go do what you need to do, go do what you want to do, because it's not that you don't deserve it. Like, you are worth it. If there's something you want to do, you're worth it. You just have to do the work to earn it. And it can be that easy. It can be that easy. You do it in love and it will return to you in love too. So that's what I leave you with. That's my final speaking. Yeah.
I love that. Y'all, it's just like anything else in life. Like, if you want it, you're going to have to fucking take action, my dude. Like, I'm a big fan of not being a part of the sage it away and pray it away vibe. I don't want to be in that. I want you guys, when you're in my space, to be able to hold yourself in the highest regard while you also hold yourself in so much accountability. And if you can continue to do that, and you can continue to make choices in your life that are going to get you closer to the life that you want to live, get you closer to the person that you want to be, then we're going to start to create a better world over and over again. And you guys know that that's one of my biggest goals in life. Not only do I want to teach you that you really are your own best healer, you really can take your life back in a way that's so powerful, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, energetically. You can, just like we've done today, reach out to those who have areas of genius that are outside of yours, and you can learn from them. And, as we continue to do this and build, a life for ourselves, a world for ourselves where we can actually live, instead of, I feel like, always cleaning up a mess or always looking sideways and be like, that happened again, or this thing again. Like, I look forward to a world where we can all just live and we can actually enjoy each of our days and hold space for each other. So I'm excited for you to come back, my dear. And as you guys know, go out and do something nice for yourself. This is never going to change. It's going to be the end of the podcast every single time. Go out and do something nice for someone else today. Go do something nice for someone, because from the bottom of your heart, you can feel the tingly sensation. You turn all warm and fuzzy inside and you just want to do it. That's the genuine act that I'm asking you to do. And then go do something nice for yourself. Go do something nice. I recently got an email from y'all that you went and got a pedicure and you hadn't gotten a pedicure in years. And I want to just call out to this woman because it was hilarious. She said that she had talons going on. So I would like to personally thank you, and I'm sure your shoes do as well. We had a good laugh about that. She's like, bitch, I hadn't gotten a pedicure in so long. So go out, do something nice for yourself, go do something nice for others. And thank you again, my dear, for being here. You guys have a wonderful
so
day,
much.
and we will
Bye.
chat with you soon. Bye.